And we're late. There you go. We're late this morning. We had some family issues there. Ian's been working with a couple of sick kids and a broken car. The big headlines, though, today: Trump tariffs autos. Danielle Smith pushes back after being called a traitor. And of course, election 2025. And then the ongoing saga with Ian's car. How's it going, Ian?
Still no word. I spoke to someone at the dealership who's going to try and fix it, and it was like it sort of seemed like I'd been a victim of a crime or something. And I was speaking to a detective, and I was given my life story. But yeah, no news yet.
Well, there you go. No news is good news, I guess, in a way. I'm Jim Check with Kelowna Now, and we're gonna finish by 11 here, though, so because we've got other stuff stacked up on this beautiful spring morning here. The sky's almost blue. It's getting there anyway. Working on it. Um, Donald Trump in the news for sure. Again, he did slap those tariffs on automobiles that go into the United States, 25%, and they're not sure yet if that applies to parts. There might be some carve-outs in that, so they're waiting to see what those carve-outs look like, and so we're still not 100% sure where that's all at.
Also, not sure when they're actually going to be put up to 25%. It's
Yeah,
going to be
it's
like a gradual increase, apparently. I mean, as usual
uh,
with Donald Trump, none of it makes any sense. Completely
yeah, it's just like
amateurish.
it's like the cat with the string again, right? The cat's got the string and then wants to know how high we can jump.
And then this threat here that we're highlighting on his Truth Social is a bit of a weird one, saying that he's going to punish Canada and the EU if they work together after he started this trade war. Very, very strange thing to say. It almost suggests, dare I say it, that he's a little bit afraid and he's a little bit yeller. He's a little bit scared that the American consumer is going to be hurt, which obviously is going to happen because
Well,
that's what
I mean,
happens when you start trade wars.
and that's the thing when we've done those stories, and the UBCO professor here says, like the trade tariffs that he puts on actually hurt his people, not ours immediately. I mean, it's because they end up paying more money for the goods, right? So, and it says that the auto tariffs could add $3,000 to $10,000 on the cost of an American buying an automobile right now. But I mean, he did, I guess, temper that when he sold it to the Americans. He said no interest on American-made automobiles. So like you can actually, sorry, not no interest. You can write the interest off on American-made automobiles. Let's see the government match that here in Canada. That would be a huge boom for our auto manufacturers and for, if you said, for Canadian-made autos. That's an incentive to buy an automobile. I think you get a lot of people going out there to buy an auto.
Yeah, well, I mean, it does seem to be the direction that we're heading in general, doesn't it? Not just in the US, but I mean, it seems like we're heading towards attempts to be self-sufficient in the world's kind of economic blocks. Don't really know if Canada can do that. I don't know if Canada can have a completely indigenous auto manufacturing sector. That seems like a big ask to me, but
Yeah. Well,
let's wait and see.
we don't have any auto manufacturers like that are Canadian. They're all American automobile manufacturers and some Japanese auto manufacturers that are manufacturing here in Canada. Like Canada's automobile manufacturing, I think, ground to a halt when they stopped making the Bricklin.
When it flew off, when it started to
Blew
take
off, yeah.
off.
Of fame with Michael J. Fox there. It says Mark Carney says he had to suspend his campaign for a couple of days to meet with Trump. I don't know if that meeting's going to take place because I don't see a meeting date, but he says that he's had
It's
to
not. It's
pause.
not. It's not to meet with Trump. I don't think it's to deal with him. He's going to meet with his he's going to meet with his team of people that have
Mm,
been
right.
put together to deal with this. So that includes the likes of John Charest and also that guy Mark Wiseman, the guy who wants 100 million people in Canada by the end of this century. So all of those guys are going to be getting together, and there's lots of people.
Yeah.
I think there's like 2 dozen people in that committee or something like that. So
All
that's
the
who he's
good
going to meet
people.
with.
Jean Charest, like I'm not sure if he's conservative or liberal, and then I think Rachel Notley might be in that group as well. No,
I think you're right. Yeah, I think that is correct. But then
all the
there's also a separate kind of inner circle team, which is just the same old people like Champagne and Jolie and all the rest of it. So I'm not sure actually now that I think about it whether it's going to be just that one or also this wider group. But I would suspect that it will be the wider group because why assemble it, if you're not going to use it?
They say they assembled some of the best to deal with trade and past politicians, and just absent from there is somebody that has an economics degree, and that would be Stephen Harper. Why isn't he in that group?
I think that's quite an important question, really, considering before Mark Carney came along, Stephen Harper was considered to be Canada's like economic guru, wasn't he?
And I think Mark Carney actually used to work for him as well.
Yeah, kind of, I guess. With him, he would probably say.
Yeah, well, that's what he would say today. But anyway, Danielle Smith has been called out and even called a traitor for talking to U.S. officials still. So here's her response, part of her response here.
Premier has a statement to make.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. When U.S. President Donald Trump first announced his threatened tariffs against Canada and began musing about our country,
Not on there. Rommel.
would cost the jobs of hundreds of thousands of Canadians, would depress our economy, devastate our budget, and damage the sovereignty of our country. And in the roughly 4 months until just before last weekend's federal election call, premiers, party leaders, and Canadians were united, other than perhaps the Alberta NDP, in working as hard as we could to convince the U.S. President and Congress to reconsider these unjustified actions against our country. In fact, premiers were all encouraged by each other, as well as by the former Prime Minister and his ministers, to visit the U.S., to get on U.S. media, to speak with every U.S. official and influencer we could to convince the U.S. President to refrain from imposing these tariffs. It was all about working as Team Canada for the greater good. Enter Liberal Prime Minister Mark Carney. Now, all of a sudden, it's apparently treason to talk to American media personalities that we disagree with. It is disloyal to try and persuade high-profile Republicans holding influence with the President to abandon his tariff policies on Canada. Indeed, it's a high crime to try and convince U.S. officials to refrain from imposing tariffs until after our country has elected a leader with a strong mandate. Shame on all who dare to speak with the enemy, they now say. These are the Team Carney and NDP talking points. Their endgame is quite obvious. Frighten and divide Canadians. Try and make Canadians forget the utter incompetence of Liberal and NDP policies that have been inflicted on this country over the last 10 years. Associate Conservatives with President Trump. And if they play their cards just right and sprinkle in just enough anti-Alberta rhetoric, presto, Canada might elect another Liberal majority government. Well, the Carney Liberals and the Nenshi NDP are right about one thing. Our country is indeed vulnerable right now. And the reason why is as clear as a sunny Alberta day. It is because for the last 10 years, Liberal and NDP leaders across this country, both federal and provincial, have repeatedly sold out Canada and Alberta with policies that have landlocked our immense natural resources, made nation-building projects practically impossible to finance and build, and have made securing access to our ports an exercise in frustration and futility. These Liberal and NDP leaders, from Trudeau to Singh and now to Prime Minister Mark Carney, have done everything in their power to sow investment uncertainty, to add impossibly high costs on the development of our resources, and have disaster.
There you go. You can go watch that full thing on Danielle Smith's social accounts. Again,
Furious, isn't she? And I mean, I can understand, as usual, with anything Alberta related. You don't need that much empathy, I don't think, to understand why anybody would be miffed, why anybody would be upset. But I mean, particularly in this case, she's been accused of going off to meet with a far-right anti-Canada psychopath, basically. And then you look at the small print and you find out that they're talking about Ben Shapiro, who's just like a complete nerd, like a total dork who what on earth is anybody doing calling that guy far right? As if he's some sort of like fascist in a uniform. Like for God's sake,
It's
he's like a
the
complete dweeb. He's like a libertarian. He's like Reagan on steroids. And these
and it's
people seem to
a,
think that he's far right. That's lunacy.
and if you look through Ben Shapiro's tweets, you'll see that he is very supportive of Canada and says, "Why are we doing this to our best partner?" So odd, no, but it's not odd that Alberta seems to be the whipping boy constantly for the federal government. And you can, like what she says that they like have been trying to landlock Alberta's resources, and then they have receipts. Karina Gold, a Liberal MP, has said, "Let's do everything we can to landlock Alberta oil and gas." And like the policies put out by the Liberals and the NDP have done just that.
Yeah, and it's caused terrible uncertainty and fear even in Alberta, hasn't it? It's really quite understandably has upset a lot of people in Alberta, and that's why they elected somebody like Danielle Smith, and that's why independence is as crazy as it might seem. That's why it has grown in popularity in recent years in Alberta. I mean, it all really goes back to that. It goes back to them feeling like they're being robbed, basically, and also sort of handicapped at the same time.
Yeah. And then we got the poll here for Angus Reid Institute saying, "Why the surge?" And they say it's driven by Carney, Trump's threats, and the ABC factor. And I did an interview with Mario Canseco yesterday on the polls as well. Good interview. You can go watch that. And it should be, it's in our YouTube channel. But Ian, I think that story will go up today sometime too, as well.
Yeah, it should do. This Angus Reid, though, I imagine that this is sort of like a less comprehensive version of what you and Mario discussed. But it sort of highlights there's a lot more than just this one that we're showing here, but it goes into how most of the new votes have indeed, or they're not votes, but most of the better polling for the Liberals seems to come from the NDP. So it's NDP voters that are just they obviously don't want to give Jagmeet Singh another vote or give the party another vote, and they think that Carney's a better option. But also quite a few Conservatives actually in there, and also some Liberals who it seems like some Liberals have kind of, I mean, this isn't speculative. I know this for a fact. Like quite a lot of Liberals have just given up. They just lost enthusiasm for their party under Trudeau, and now they're back. So it's a combination of all of those factors is giving the Liberals quite the boost.
Yeah, and then Tom Mulcair came out yesterday, the former NDP leader, and saying, like, don't vote for the NDP, vote for either the Conservatives or the Liberals, saying that this should be a two-party race and the rest of the parties should sit down, take a seat. But I did watch Jagmeet Singh's big rally there in Ontario, and, big rally, wasn't very big, but that question was asked of him, and it doesn't sound like he's willing to take a knee for Canada.
Well, probably, from an NDP perspective, not necessarily a Canadian perspective, but from an NDP perspective, you would look at these polls and say, right, the Liberals and Conservatives are really close, probably going to be a hung parliament, like a minority government. So we stand to gain massively here as another party, as a sort of smaller party. We could prop one of them up and have another bonanza at the taxpayers' expense.
And that's what Tom Mulcair was saying. We don't need another, NDP holding all the cards again, because that's been, like the last two terms of the Liberal government have been nothing but disastrous for Canada.
Yeah, well, minority governments are pretty disastrous in general, aren't they, really? Because it ends up being a situation when pretty much nobody gets what they want. It's like the perfect storm of things that nobody wants, except the people who agree to it and get to, play along as prime minister and whatever else, the ones that get the jobs. But I mean, generally speaking, a minority government, I mean, it's bad. It's bad in the good times, but I mean, in the sort of bad times as we're in now, I can't think of anything worse, frankly.
And then I did talk a little bit with Mario Canseco too, in saying that Jagmeet, with Justin Trudeau gone, all that anger and frustration for Justin Trudeau is likely going to land squarely on the plate of Jagmeet Singh.
And that is, to be fair, that's usually how it happens as well. I mean, that's like it's like a rule in politics. The little guy gets screwed over in any sort of coalition, any sort of deal. That
Yeah.
happened, I remember, in my younger days, before Nick Clegg went on to bigger things as Mark Zuckerberg's servant. He was the deputy prime minister in Britain because he led a party very similar to the NDP in terms of its like size, went into business with the Conservative Party, and then at the next election got absolutely obliterated, completely wiped out.
Yeah.
And it's
And I
just
guess,
kind of like one of these rules in political science, if you want to glamorize it and call it a science, even though it isn't. But it's one of these things that happens. The little party gets absolutely shafted because the voters tend to look and say, like, what is the point of you anyway? What's the point? I might as well just vote for one of the big parties.
and then we focus a little bit on our local area here. Kent Mulgad went out with Nick, and they got the rail trail. The cleanup is happening again, and this draws some criticism. So we're going to play this video here from Kelowna now.
It's the seasonal spring maintenance operation that we've done typically either in fall or spring of the last couple of years.
So it's the annual spring cleanup at the Rail Trail Homeless Encampment in Kelowna. Is it a necessary event to clean things up and make it more safe and secure for the people who find themselves living here? Or is it an inhumane and violent disruption? Depends who you talk to. We don't usually see the area fenced off and quite this level of police and bylaw presence. What's different?
I would argue that the level of enforcement presence is quite similar at certain points during the operation. Just right now, given the nature of some of the disruption that we've experienced down at the site by external parties, we put in additional measures to ensure the health, safety, and security of staff and site users.
The city has barricaded off the rail trail for what they call heavy construction, for community safety upgrades. What have you been seeing?
Yeah, so that's convenient rhetoric, which cities always use, is carrying compassionate community safety. What they really mean is they've fenced off the entire perimeter of Tent City. They won't let anybody like myself inside because they don't want any accountability. They've already arrested 2 people with whom they were entering into their homes.
What did that look like? Describe the arrests you saw.
I mean, a couple of officers like kind of violently manhandling somebody and then putting them into a car. Again, I'm at a distance because they won't allow me to be any closer because it probably looks a lot worse when you're closer.
You mentioned there were dogs or at least a dog involved?
Yeah, they took away somebody's dog, somebody who has lived with this dog for years and years and takes good care of them. I know this person and this dog.
The police did ripping tents saying, "Oh, you'll have a new one," and I'm like, "What is going on here?" Like, my dog is protective of our things, so he's barking at them. And they're like, this dog's going to be an issue. And so they're like, hurry up, get dressed. And I didn't even have a shirt on or anything. And then she just barges right in. She's like, if your dog bites me, threatening me. And I'm like, so I throw my plastic cereal bowl out my door. And I was charged with assault and brought downtown and told I'm not even allowed back on the property.
This doesn't strike you as a humane event that's going on?
You can go to kelownanow.com and you can watch the rest of that video.
Very sad.
Very sad. Yeah, and that was from one of the residents there, I guess. BC Interior Hospital forced to shut down its ER once again, and this is just so frustrating for the people of Lillooet who have been enduring so much, in the wildfire, and then the hospital shut down, and they're told to go to Kamloops if you have an emergency. Roads permitting.
And also Highway 90, yeah, because Highway 99, they had to close it down overnight because of avalanche risk. So if you lived south of Lillooet and you needed to go to Kamloops, I mean, I guess you would have to go all the way down that road and then back along like the Coquihalla or something like that. It would be a nightmare.
Do you know what doesn't make any sense to me is why doesn't Premier Eby and the NDP prioritize these hospitals that are just so essential, and telling people that they have to drive on these roads. Just pay whatever nurse or doctor you have to in the Lower Mainland. Send them up there, pay them whatever you need to pay them to get them to go there, and make sure they have coverage. This is ridiculous. Like, we flew, think about this, we flew Bonnie Henry around in a helicopter nonstop during COVID because we said that was so important. They could get on a helicopter and be in Lillooet within an hour. Explain it to me. Explain the madness to me.
And also, I would add to that, I mean, it's not like you would need a battalion of nurses and doctors. Like, usually when these shutdowns happen, it's literally one body. They need one body. Yeah.
Right.
So like, you could presumably find somebody in the Metro Vancouver area, which is like 3 million people or something. I'm sure you could get someone there.
It's absolutely frustrating because, you know, I grew up in a small town. Absolutely frustrating that during COVID, every day we were flying Bonnie Henry with a helicopter so she could stand at a podium and tell you what was shut down that day. And here we don't have access to a helicopter, I guess, or a nurse or a doctor that you could say, hey, we'll pay you whatever for overtime. Can you go cover a shift in... I bet you I could do it with a couple of phone calls. I could probably get this done with a couple of phone calls. I could probably, if they gave me access to the helicopter and the money that's needed to incentivize these people to go there for the day.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they do this in other countries. I don't know why it's not done here. I mean, the cynic in me, in the back of my head, is whispering naughty words in my ears, saying the one thing that all of these hospitals, all of these areas have in common is that they're not represented by the NDP, are they? These are all BC Conservative ridings, and before that, BC Liberal ridings.
So maybe they should declare a national or a provincial emergency and ask the Red Cross to come and fill the need because they can't do it.
Yeah, see if they can get UNRWA or something like that. It's one of those UN agencies to come in.
It's just, I mean, that's enough is enough. Like Premier Eby, like, come on, like, you got to do better than this. You have to do better than this. Like, how many times is it already for Lillooet and these other hospitals? How many times so far this year?
Last week, I don't know the number this year, but I mean, I think Lillooet is ahead. I think it's over 10 now already this year for Lillooet. But last week, they just had, it was like closure after closure. I think they were only open like 1 or 2 days last week. I mean, it's been a bit of a tragedy in that particular area.
David Eby steps to the podium to tell people that he's taken, you know, different types of booze off the shelves and how it's such an emergency for British Columbians to remove that booze off the shelves. Why don't you step to the podium or just actually pick up the phone and call a helicopter company? I know a couple names here that are local too. They could probably do it for you. And also phone Josie there and say, listen, convince some doctors and nurses to join this program. You know, they said they got a whole bunch joining the new payment schedule, to join this program so that you can fly out to Lillooet, to Merritt, to 100 Mile House on a moment's notice to cover a shift. And we'll fly you back home.
Even people who are a bit younger, maybe. It doesn't necessarily have to be like a married mother with 4 kids that needs to get home at a certain time. Yeah. There are plenty of like younger nurses and doctors who are pretty used to moving around anyway. I mean, I don't think it would be that disruptive to their lives.
I think we should phone them up and say, listen, if you've run out of possible solutions, maybe you should watch our morning news show, and maybe you can get some solutions, because this seems like ridiculous. I know some doctors and nurses personally that I could probably convince to go and cover these shifts so that the people in Lillooet could have like basic care in an emergency and not told to drive on a road, roads permitting. What are they supposed to do?
Yeah, it is. It's really outrageous. I mean, even if the roads are in perfect order, that's still pretty outrageous. I mean, the only reason you're going to go and see somebody urgently, like in the middle of the night or something like that, is if you're in serious trouble. So
I think the people need to start getting really angry as opposed to just taking this from the NDP.
Yeah, but the sad thing is, I don't want to be like going too much of a downer here, but like in our experience, it seems a lot of people in these smaller towns, it's almost like they're used to it. It's like they're used to being kicked in the face. Like even the interviews this doesn't apply to the mayor of Merritt, who seems to be an exception, but some of the other people we've spoken to, they just kind of think, oh, well, it's just kind of life.
Well,
But it shouldn't be this way.
the government actually blackmails you or tells you, like, if you make too much noise, you get nothing. Like, and I've heard that from officials here in town, like, you know, in the BC housing thing, like, you know, if you make too much noise on the drug and addiction thing, you just won't see any funding.
Yep, and you know you have to be cautious like that, don't you? And I can understand why somebody would hold their tongue, but there comes a time, doesn't there, where you kind of have to take a
Yeah.
stand.
And this minister has passed away, so I can say whatever now. She said to me, Jim, she said, if there's a problem, all you need to do is shine a light on it and make it bright enough, and it'll get results. And here we go. We're shining a light on this, and we're not going to let it go. And so, Eby, you need to step up. Let's try to get him on the phone.
Perfectly reasonable.
I guess it's time for us to see if we can get another interview with him. Maybe we can ask him directly why that solution hasn't been looked at.
Yeah, well, I last had I tried to get an interview with Josie Osborne, the health minister, a couple of months ago. That was not granted, but I did get a statement from her. So yeah, I mean, probably it's about time now, isn't it, that we had a proper conversation with her.
Maybe we should ask if there's any helicopters left in BC. All right, on to election 2025. We got a new intro to go here. Are we going to play the intro? Rommel's saying no. Rommel. What's going on?
Rommel the fun killer.
Rommel, my buddy. Like, come on, man. Anyway, we're going to play that intro tomorrow. Yeah, he's like, tomorrow. Anyway, here's our election. Here comes the candy man. And I like this one, actually. Pierre Poilievre says, introducing Canada's first TFSA top-up since Stephen Harper gave us a TFSA. And I say to people, the TFSA is one of the best things that the government's ever given Canadians. The TFSA is a tax-free savings account. Not enough young people use it. It is the vehicle to use. And you combine that with an account called Wealth Simple, which is a free trading platform. We put up the link before, and we can put it in again maybe. You get $25 to open an account. You can actually start making decisions. Instead of having that $9 cup of sugar water, you can buy $9 worth of any stock and start building your wealth in a tax-free saving account. This is so important. This is probably one of the best things the government's ever done, and now we're getting it topped up, and it is probably one of the most important things for young people, for sure. Like, this is a real vehicle for all Canadians.
Yeah, and I mean it's quite an interesting concept as well, because this extra top-up thing is just for Canadian investments. This is one of the biggest problems in the whole Canadian economy. This is the explanation for why productivity is so low. It's because there's not really much capital is put into Canada, you know?
Yeah.
And you can kind of see one example of that, and I don't mean to squirt lemon juice in his eyeballs, but it's the perfect example of the moment, is Brookfield Asset Management leaving Canada. It's just one of the many examples. And that was obviously under Mark Carney's direction, unfortunately for him and his campaign. But the money in Canada doesn't tend to stay in Canada, and that's a bit of a, that's like a mini tragedy in the economy, really. So if there's any way to incentivize investment in Canada, then yeah, jump on it. So it does seem like Poilievre he's bringing these out at a speed of like one a day right now. So he's obviously got a lot of these in his pocket that he's been working on. And this one does seem like it will be quite popular.
And if Premier Eby is still listening, I don't know if Chrystia Freeland listens, but I don't know if Eby's listening. But the Alberta investment tax credit was one of the best vehicles for getting people to invest in Alberta. Maybe, Mr. Eby, well, capital is fleeing British Columbia. You might want to look at that. And if you need help, you can give me a call. You know how to find me. You can send me an email, and we can talk, because I can help you with it. Again, just trying to help with solutions, right? A helicopter would help the healthcare system, and a BC investment tax credit would help investment in British Columbia. There you go. A Holly Doan Blacklock story. Mark Carney forgot the sedition jibe, because, you know, he said, speaking to reporters at the Ambassador Bridge in Windsor, that's where the short-lived protest 3 years ago, Carney was asked what his reflections on the Freedom Convoy moment. And he said, what do you say to Canadians who lost trust in the Liberal government back then and do not have trust in you now? He said, well, look, I haven't been a politician before, so. And anyway, back then, he said, it's time In February 7th, 2022, a Globe and Mail column headline, "It's time to end the sedition in Ottawa." He likened the protest to a conspiracy to topple the 44th Parliament. "No one should have any doubt," Carney said, or wrote, "this is sedition. That's a word I never thought I'd use in Canada. It means incitement of resistance or to an insurrection against lawful authority. Anybody sending money to the convoy should be in no doubt that they're actually funding sedition and foreign funders and blah, blah, blah." But the RCMP in internal emails ridiculed Carney for misreading sedition laws. Carney's definition appeared to be a cut and paste from the American Webster Dictionary. The Canadian Criminal Code stipulates use of force is required for a charge of sedition. "The key bit is the use of force," said the RCMP officer. "I'm all about resolution to this, and a forceful one for us is victorious. But from the facts on the ground, I don't see where they're there, except in a small number of cases." Agreed, said another officer. Like barricading streets and blasting horns has little to do that would constitute a use of force. And no Freedom Convoy protester was charged with sedition. About 230 were possessed, 119 charged with mischief. And this Carney played a big role in that. He says he wasn't in government, but he played a big role in kind of getting them to even use the Emergencies Act to remove them with force. That's who used force. That's who used force. They used, just like the Romans did back in the Roman days when they brought the horses out.
Yeah, they should have brought out the legions, really, shouldn't they? At least then it would have been entertaining rather than squalid as it was. But I mean, I do find this funny. This is like the 1,000th time that he's just been asked a question, pretty direct question. He was asked about his Globe and Mail article explicitly, and then he's disappeared into a non sequitur and said, "Oh, I wasn't in government then." It's like, what? What does that have to do with? The question was very simple. Right. It's about this article. And then the other thing that I find funny about this article is, so look when it was written there, February the 7th, 2022. So 1 year after the January 6th event in the US. And he says here, "This is sedition. That's a word I never thought I'd use in Canada." And did you not wonder, Mr. Carney, why you used that word? Because the place that maybe you look to an awful lot, the United States, was completely obsessed with that word, and that was constantly being used. And to be fair, obviously it's not an American word, but it's most commonly used in an American context. And I'm talking about the US Constitution. There are certain laws still on the books in the US that have that word sedition in them. It's kind of like, in politics at least, it's a word that is monopolized by the Americans. And he doesn't even seem to realize it, but he's got America brain, just like Chrystia Freeland, if you're listening. She so often just has this American brain, but doesn't even realize that she does. And she uses terms like that. And it's just, it's a little bit disappointing, I must say.
Yeah, he played a big role in that. And he's obviously, right in that article, he was trying to exert influence too, as well, right? So, this keeps saying that he wasn't in government, but he was also the economic advisor and obviously trying to influence other policy decisions. And a lot of people are saying he had a lot to do with the use of the Emergencies Act.
Well, he's given it his stamp of approval, isn't he? As like this old sage within the Canadian democratic scene. He's given it his big fat Mark Carney stamp of approval, like. Any sort of reaction to the events.
And he got called out too
because has pre-approved them.
He's got called out too because his use of the spelling of the word paycheck was an American version of the word paycheck. And don't forget, he keeps calling himself a Canadian and all this stuff. And then even in this, he uses the Webster's dictionary, the American dictionary, to determine what a sedition is. Anyway. There you go.
They've got America brain, haven't they? That's what it is. They're drunk on Americanisms. I just wish more people would be conscious of that and try and pull themselves out of that the American shaped orifice that they've got their head inside of.
This reminds me of the movie. This is my opinion. This reminds me of the movie It's a Wonderful Life. And here's Mr. Carney. He's basically Mr. Potter in this movie. Don't forget that we talked about that yesterday, where he was squeezing the renters. Jagmeet Singh accused him of unfair tactics to squeeze the renters like Mr. Potter would do. And then our next story is Jim Bailey. He's there with the seniors. So we got, said this is another Holiday Dome Blacklock story, and it says Polyev said many workers over 65 would bring lots of wisdom and insight and remain on the job, but they get punished. And I've said this many times. They get punished for going to the job because they claw back their old age security net. So he's actually said that he's going to raise that tax-free amount to $35,000 so that that extra money when they go and work a few hours at Walmart or wherever they are, welding or doing whatever, that they don't get punished for actually trying to be useful in the community when they need to be.
Yeah, it's the way he described it. I mean, I think he sold it quite well, as you would expect. Though I would take I would have to take exception to your idea that he's of a Jimmy Stewart mold. I don't think Pierre Poilievre, unfortunately for him, is anywhere near as likable as Jimmy Stewart.
Hey,
if he was, I think he would have had this election sorted up already.
It's my movie, and Mr. Potter definitely fits the role, right? Mr. Potter.
Yeah. Who's Frank then? We need a Frank. Is that Stephen Harper?
There you go. But definitely, Mark Carney definitely knows how to play the role of the banker, for sure. And then just in the way he treats reporters, too, he's definitely like Mr. Potter. Go watch the movie. You haven't seen that movie. I've probably seen it like 30 times. So one of my favorite movies, It's a Wonderful Life.
Yeah, it's a wonderful movie.
It's a wonderful movie. The last Holiday Dome Blacklock story there, wealth transfer is going to be historic as the boomers age out and are starting to leave some money behind for their kids who can really use it. So maybe they can buy a house. But this is going to be huge. Canadians born in the 1990s whose parents were homeowners are twice as likely to own a home in 2021. And then those parents were not. A third of homeowners under 35 had help from their parents. Yeah, so I mean, more and more kids, the only way they're buying anything is if the people help out. The bank estimated 74% of adult children with co-signed home loans wouldn't otherwise qualify for a mortgage. House prices have more than quadrupled since 2000, with debt levels rising to over 180% of disposable income. Another stat to be proud of from this 10 years of the Liberal government. There you go.
I mean, that's made home ownership something akin to what it was in, the dark ages or something like that, where it's like, do you own a home? And the answer to that question is based on whether or not your dad had a home. It's like, yeah, I've got my dad's home. It's like, what are we living in some sort of fucking, sorry, excuse my French, some kind of flipping
It's a Wonderful Life
serfdom or something.
It's a Wonderful Life, because in that movie there, when Jimmy doesn't it doesn't exist, they showed him what happens if he doesn't exist. All it is Pottersville. Nobody owns a home. Nobody owns a home.
Yeah.
Pottersville.
And it's all full of sin. And I've just realized that I called him Frank earlier, but his name is Clarence. I'm thinking of the angel. He's called Clarence.
An angel gets its wings when the bell rings, right?
Yeah. No, it's that scene. I think that might be one of the best scenes, is when he goes downtown into Pottersville and he sees it all. It's just like full of bad stuff going on.
And it was the Bailey Savings and Loan Company that actually saved the people. And God knows we could use some saving. There you go.
That would be nice. And we could use Jimmy Stewart as well if he would like to come back and help us.
Maybe come back as Clarence and get his wings.
Yeah.
Let's look at markets. We don't have a few minutes left here because we're trying to do a condensed show because obviously, family comes first. And Ian's battling a couple of sick kids and a sick car all at the same time. Our friend Gold showing that it's the canary in a gold mine. Things are not all that well in geopolitical markets and stuff like this. Uncertainty and all this thing. Gold clearly hanging on to that $3,000 mark, hanging on to it really well. And in Canadian dollars, $43.70 in Canadian dollars. A few lumps of gold and you can buy yourself a house almost, right?
Yeah, some boomers will be handing that down to their Generation Z children. And
a reminder to Canadians that the Central Bank of Canada sold all its gold holdings way back in the 60s and 70s at an average price of $300 an ounce.
So don't expect any inheritance from the Canadian government.
They said it was a dumb investment. Who's dumb now? There you go. Bitcoin. Oh yeah, and Canada is the only nation, not just in the G7, we're the only nation in the G7 that has 0 gold holdings, and we're also the only nation in the G20. When you hear Chrystia Freeland, you're listening, Chrystia, you keep bragging about the G7 and G20 where we sit. We are sitting at the bottom of that pile, the only one. We're sitting alone, actually, sitting absolutely alone, like the kid in school that sits at the table. I was that kid, sitting at the table by himself. That's the kid. That's who we are.
In more ways than one. I mean, if you want to, well, we don't have time, but Bill C-18 and the lack of freedom for media, and we could really go on. We're on that table by ourselves for a number of reasons.
And why is the question. And if you dare say anything, then you get called a traitor like Danielle Smith. But anyway, Bitcoin. Bitcoin looks like it wants to take a run at that $100,000 mark. Looking good. It must be GameStop fueling that run, eh? But technically, it looks like it wants to take a run at that $100,000 mark, right? If you're a technical analyst, there you go. Canadian dollar, yikes. There you go. It's under actually 69 this morning, under 70 this morning. But this is just showing it's bouncing around. The tariffs are not going to be friendly to the Canadian dollar. The election will actually determine the path and where this Canadian dollar ends up. And it sounds like we're already starting to see some layoffs here in the steel and aluminum plants. We'll check into that story for tomorrow, right? And we're also starting to hear that some of the migrants are fleeing into Canada amid that U.S. crackdown. And we thought that was going to happen. We talked about that a while ago. That if there's this mass deportation in the United States, where are they going to go?
We've already got that Yale professor of philosophy is fleeing. So there's one refugee already.
There you go. Glenn says he's going gold panning. Anybody want to invest? He drinks by Carney. There you go. There you go, Glenn.
Get yourself into Yukon.
You can gold pan anywhere you want. In our AI and tech section, we're almost winding up here. AI and tech section. This is an article that's on Kelowna. It's the Wild West, how AI is creating new frontiers for crime in Canada. You got to be very careful. AI can be pretty damn smart, so be careful out there, right? Don't send money to people. You know what I mean? Be a little more
cautious. The biggest thing, don't answer the phone and speak to who you think is your bank or something like that. Call them yourself. That's the best advice that I could think of. Call them yourself. Go onto their website, get their number, call them yourself, because they can impersonate the number. They spoof the number.
And they don't need to ask you for your information. They have it. You know what I mean? If they're just like, oh, I just need your social insurance number and your credit card number just to verify who you are. It's just like, good one.
Yeah, nice one.
And Bill Gates says there's only going to be 3 jobs left safe from AI. And we're not in that. It says the only 3 jobs left are coders, biologists, and energy experts. Well, maybe you and I are energy experts.
I honestly don't understand. I mean, coders, already ChatGPT can write quite a lot of code. I mean, how are they safe?
He said that they're going to be safe because they can actually, monitor the AI and shut it off when they need to. I'm sure the AI is going to figure out a way to not be shut off.
Yeah, and I would be very suspicious of coders. I'm not really sure what he means by biologists.
Well, Bill Gates,
experts. So.
I think Bill Gates is kind of going off what he said a number of years ago. He said the job that you should be getting your kids is coding. You need to teach them programming. And so he's probably not letting that go because people are saying that he's been wrong about that. So,
right, there you go.
EV section, Lucid setting the stage for their event this weekend in New York City. Lucid and Rivian and Tesla kind of might be the benefactors in this tariff war because they're all American made.
Yeah, well, that's the luxury car market then. No more BMWs. You're going to have to buy this kind of thing.
And then if the Americans do that interest-free or getting to write the interest off on a car loan, that'll probably be a boom for people buying cars again. If you're listening, Pierre or Carney or whoever you are that's going to win this thing, why not try to model some of the good things that they're doing down there, not some of the bad things. Like you guys already, Carney's actually showing Canadians how not to pay tax. Move your company to the Bahamas and move your headquarters to New York. So I guess that's how you beat the tax system in Canada. You just follow Carney's lead.
And he said that was patriotic, didn't he? He said that just makes it easier for you to pay tax in Canada. Don't really know how that works, but if Carney reckons, then that's, let's do it. Let's move our HQ to Bermuda.
There you go. Unless you're in our meme section, we're wrapping up at the end of the day here, and we're going to be on for a really big show tomorrow. We're going to have a good show tomorrow. It says the new all-famous female Pirates of the Caribbean movie. Just 2 hours of boats backing into the rocks. Don't let your wife see this.
Yeah.
Especially with that laugh that you did there, right? And then I guess keeping...
Yeah, I shouldn't be laughing like that. I'm sorry. Sorry, wife.
And keeping in the partnership realm, man goes to heaven immediately, asks God to replay arguments with his wife so he can prove he was right. Yeah, that's a good one too. I can only wish. And then the last one, Hegseth's kicking himself for not just getting 13 soldiers killed and giving $80 billion of weapons to terrorists. They're actually going after him more than the whole Afghanistan debacle.
I think that's probably true, isn't it? And certainly more than they ever went after. I'm thinking of other examples of, information leaking or whatever. Like I'm thinking of Hillary Clinton. Like the mainstream media in the US didn't really
acid washing computer drives.
Yeah, that was a bit crazy. I forgot about that detail. Yeah, I mean, it did seem like, and then also like Joe Biden having all of those secret documents in his garage.
Well, because he was an old man,
his little sports car.
And it said that the excuse was he was an old, confused man, not worthy of charging.
Yeah, that was actually true, wasn't it? That he was a vulnerable old man that didn't really know what he was doing, something along those lines.
But like a lot of the media outlets even said the withdrawal from Afghanistan was a dramatic success. I don't know, like the videos you're watching with people falling off plane wheels and that obviously was a bit confusing, but I guess they could.
And then Benghazi as well, very sort of similar in a way, wasn't it? That was considered to be Obama-Hillary nightmare, wasn't it? That they didn't prepare enough for that.
So just ask yourself which outlets you're watching and how they portrayed that Afghanistan withdrawal and different things, and then maybe stop watching those outlets because maybe, just maybe, they may not be exactly sharing what is true.
Yeah. And remember as well, sorry, last thing on the Afghan, I know we have to run, but that they didn't tell their allies. Talk about America like slapping and insulting its allies. They didn't tell anyone else that they were going to leave. They just went and left everybody else standing there holding the hot dog. It was like what a nightmare that was in so many ways.
Yeah, and it took a lot. Yeah, and those 13 soldiers that lost their lives and many, many more that were injured in that day. And just like it reminded me of the Vietnam withdrawal. I don't know if you remember seeing some of those videos when they withdrew from Vietnam that day off the rooftops with helicopters.
Yeah, last chopper out of Saigon.
Yeah, it was pretty bad. And that plane that is going to stick in my mind for a long time, those big, heavy, and I can't remember what the name of that plane, the Herc, I think it was a Hercules or whatever, when it's leaving. And there's so many people draped onto the wheel wells because they know if they stayed, they'd be dead. So they'd rather take a chance of hanging into a plane's wheel well. Like, oh my God, right?
Yeah, what a catastrophe that was.
Yeah, sadness. There you go. That's our show for today. We'll be back tomorrow, hopefully on time. Hopefully, maybe we'll even know what's going on with Ian's car. The saga continues, but
yeah, fingers crossed, eh?
There you go. We do thank you for watching Kelowna Now.
We don't just report the news. We live here too. We're your neighbors, bringing you stories that matter to all of us. No government funding, no outside influence. Kelowna Now, local, independent. News you can trust.